So first of all, just thank you everybody for joining this webinar today. Thank you for our speakers and the organizers as well. So this is a webinar that's being hosted by the Southeast Asia Bioethics Network. This network made its first grant call in February 2024 with the aim of fostering bioethics scholarship in Southeast Asia in particular. And today we have invited 3 of those grant awardees to speak about their research and present some of the preliminary data or the proposals. And through this webinar, we really hope to familiarize the wider community about the bioethics issues that are pertinent here in Southeast Asia, and at the same time also provide the grant awardees with an opportunity to obtain some feedback on their research proposals. So before we start, just a few housekeeping rules. Please could everybody mute their microphones? There will be time for questions. We'll take a few questions after each presentation and then more questions at the end. But we ask, please put your questions into the chat box, and I will moderate that. And if we can't get through all of the questions, then hopefully we will have time to follow up later. So without further ado, I will present the timetable. So first of all, we will have an introduction to the network from Associate Professor Saran Kaur, who is the co-principal investigator of the CBION network. And then Dr. Peksan, the network lead, is going to present about other funding opportunities in the network, and then we'll move on to our 3 presentations, and then at the end a Q&A session. So thank you very much, and with that I'm going to hand over to Associate Professor Saran Kaur.
Hi everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. It's very exciting to be able to have our first set of awardees present their work. I work on the Southeast Asia Bioethics Network, which is part of a Wellcome funded award, a research development award, which is a wonderful opportunity for us to build scholarship in Southeast Asia, as Mary said. This is our team. So at the moment, we primarily come from the University of Malaya, from Mahidol Oxford Tropical Medicine Research Unit. We have our researchers at National University of Singapore. I think Serene and Pek Yong are here today. And we also have Teck Chuan at Sing Health and Tamra from the University of Sydney. And of course, we have our friends and other members of the network. For instance, Mary, who come to work with us, and it's really very exciting. So at present, our initial focus is on the work that we do in Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand to a certain extent, where we initially agreed that we would look at areas that we had some expertise in. So our primary focus to begin with is on emerging issues relating to healthcare for and research with mobile and marginalized populations in the region, as well as the challenges and opportunities presented by emergent health and biomedical technologies. So we've already done a couple of workshops and we've got a few reports out. And if you go to our website, you can have a look at that. But really, we want to develop a genuine Southeast Asia perspective. We want to develop a network, a relationship with people working in the region and people working on issues about the region. And we're really interested in leveraging on our geographic links with the wider Asia Pacific region. And it's something that we're very excited to be working on. Why set up? Why did we do this? Because we wanted to shape a future research agenda that was based on voices in the region. Because we really felt that Southeast Asian voices were not well heard in the mainstream bioethics literature. And we really recognize that it's such a rich culture and tradition, and there's so many really interesting and important things going on, and we wanted to be able to raise these voices. We recognize that there are some people who practice and produce bioethics but are not recognized as bioethicists. We want to hear from them, people who work on the margins with marginalized populations. We want to hear from migrant workers and refugees in the community, in the region, and the voices of Southeast Asians who come from a multiplicity of faiths. We also want to really be able to think differently about bioethics issues. And to that end, we've already run a workshop on decolonization of bioethics in Indonesia, and we're going to run another workshop in Laos where we want to really find and think about what values are common or important in Southeast Asia to particular Southeast Asian communities, and really develop a voice that is Southeast Asian as we think about these issues. There's no other comparable effort in this region. We're very excited about developing this network. And thank you for attending this webinar today. And we'll take it as, you're interested in our network and you want to be part of our work. And we're delighted to have you along. We have a set of mission and values that are up on our website that we developed using a Delphi method, which really meant that we looked around Southeast Asia. We got together a whole lot of people from different Southeast Asian countries, and we worked together to develop our mission and our values, which I won't go through because you can read them on the network and on our website. And I would like to invite you to visit our website and join our mailing list. I'll now hand over the session to Pik-san to talk about the grants. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And I would now like to speak a little bit about the funding opportunities that this network offers. The network has 4 different categories of grants, and these are the research fellowship grants, the research seed grants, professional growth fellowship grants, and internship grants. These different types of grants serve different purposes. So if we were to look at the research fellowship grants, the purpose is to provide support for extensive research in bioethics. We are looking for research proposals that take intellectual risks, that address challenging issues on bioethics in Southeast Asia, and suggest solutions and new ways of addressing these issues and opportunities. The second type of grants is research seed grants, and its purpose is to provide support for small to medium scale research in bioethics. So unlike the research fellowship grants, where we are looking at more extensive research, in research seed grants, we look at smaller to medium scale research, typically for early career researchers or researchers who want to try their ability in bioethics research. So the third type of grants that we have is professional growth fellowship grants, and its purpose is to provide support for advancing professional growth in bioethics. So these grants give opportunities to individuals who would like to develop their professional career in bioethics, and we support any activities that they would like to undertake in pursuit of their career in bioethics. So this could be writing policy papers, attending training on bioethics, organizing conferences on bioethics, or even speaking to the public generally about bioethics. And the last type of grants that we offer is internship grants, and its purpose is to provide support for practical and hands-on experience in bioethics. For these grants, we are targeting undergraduate students or postgraduate students, providing them with an opportunity to get an exposure on the practical aspects of bioethics. Those who are intending to apply for these internship grants would choose one of the host institutions that the network has partnered with, and that intern will be based in the host institutions for a period of time. Some points to note about our grants. With regard to the research fellowship grants and research seat grants, the purpose is really to develop the bioethics landscape in Southeast Asia. And for professional growth fellowship grants, the purpose is really to advance professional growth of individuals within the Southeast Asia region. For research fellowship grants, we will give priority to collaborative research. In other words, research between established researchers and Southeast Asia researchers, especially from countries with a lack of bioethics research at international level. For other types of grants, i.e. the research seat grant or research or professional growth fellowship grant, it can be undertaken on an individual basis. Now, the grant amount that we offer for research fellowship grant, it is £10,000. For research seat grants, is £6,000. For professional growth fellowship grants, is £6,000. So these are the maximum that we will offer. For internship grants, we will grant the intern a monthly stipend of £600 for up to a maximum of 3 months. And we will also provide them with a round-trip flight from their Southeast Asian home country to a Southeast Asian host institution. Our second call for grant applications will open on 1st February 2025, and we will close our applications on 30th April 2025. And this call will be made on our website. And so this is the address of our website, https://cbioethics.com. Now, with regard to the process for submitting the form, it is a relatively easy process. Visit our website, click on the Finding Opportunities tab, download and complete the application form and the curriculum vitae. For each of the grant applications, we do require a letter of recommendation from a referee. In addition, for research seat grant, professional growth fellowship grant, internship grant, we also require a letter of acceptance from a supervisor who will be supervising your work. And for internship grants, we do need additional documents, for example, the proof of nationality that you are one of the citizens of Southeast Asian countries or a PR. And we also need you to prove your student enrollment. After all these are done, you click the link on our website to access the Google form and upload all the above documents. So that's basically the procedure that you will follow when applying for our grants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pek-san, and I hope that's an encouragement for more applications in the next round. So we'll move on now to our speakers, and I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, who is Dr. Catherine Muskins, who's a research fellow at the NUS Bioethics Center with a focus of Asian bioethics, elder care, and AI. Originally from Colorado in the US, she came to Singapore in 2015 to pursue her PhD. She is a political philosopher and applied ethicist by training, and has research interests in human rights, healthcare justice, cross-cultural bioethics, with a particular interest in trust, information, and inequalities in accessing to healthcare. So, Catherine, I'm going to hand over to you now. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I think Iman was going to help me with my slides. Was that right? Okay, thank you. All right, thanks everybody for having me in. I was really excited when I heard about the Southeast Asian Bioethics Network. When I started at CBME, I met Serene and some of the others who I think I met Sharon at a event that we were hosting as well. So it's a really exciting opportunity, and I was really happy to apply for this opportunity. My project is called Taking Traditional Medicine Seriously. And if you can help me switch to the next slide, I'll continue from there. Thanks. So you've heard a little bit about me thanks to the introduction, so I won't go over that again. But to summarize the inspiration for this project, I would say I was interested to discover, after living in Singapore for a few years, how common it is for people here to engage with traditional medicines regularly alongside Western medical practices or biomedical practices. But it was also brought to my attention that many people do not disclose this to their Western medical doctors when they go in for visits with the GP. So that's part of what inspired me to look into this a little bit more. And when I found the existing literature that is in the bioethics discourse, it seems to be mostly focused on a Western perspective. So most of the research is done in either the UK or the US. And in these contexts, traditional medicines get lumped in with what's known as complementary and alternative medicine, often abbreviated as CAM. And of course, traditional medicines like TCM or Ayurvedic medicine are kind of on literally foreign soil in the US or the UK. So I think the consumption habits, the reasons that people engage with them, and the understanding that people have in the culture of what these traditions have to offer is very different than what we would find if we tried to look into the same kinds of questions in Southeast Asia. So again, that was part of the motivation for doing this research, because I think that there is something distinctive about not only traditional medicine apart from complementary or alternative medicines, but something very different about studying it, the way that it is engaged in or consumed here than in the US or UK. This also seemed to be like a timely thing to look into, given that the market for traditional medicines is increasing. Herbal remedies are something like 200, almost $300 billion industry projected to grow. And I also realized after looking into this, or beginning to look into it, how little information and scholarship from bioethics there is about traditional medicine specifically, and almost none that I could find that was specific to the Southeast Asian region. What I could find that was out there in the scholarship was often from other disciplines. So things like anthropology, there's a very large field of medical anthropology, and many medical anthropologists are interested in documenting the different kinds of medical traditions that are in Southeast Asia. But they ask different questions, of course. They're not always asking ethical questions. They're looking at how does this practice, how is it cultivated, who uses it, what is the theory that the practitioners are using. So there's a lot of different anthropological questions that they might be asking. And then I was also aware that the other field of people who are interested in this might be more like the public health workers in the region, or the WHO and the consultants who work for them. And in that note, I think that often the way in which that research is conducted is to see how they can get more people to engage with the mainstream or the official healthcare system and stop relying on traditional remedies. Depends on the context and the specific country involved, as I've since learned, but I thought that it was important to try to set up a way for different scholars of different intellectual backgrounds and different national contexts in this region to be able to share what they know and their perspectives about the use and consumption of traditional medicines of a variety of kinds in this region. So that's what my project was aimed at building. It's primarily a network building project. So you can go to the next slide. So in the proposal, what I hope to do with the funding is to set up 2 different meetings, and the first of which we've already been able to do. We were able to set up a 1-day workshop in Yogyakarta surrounding the University of Gajah Mada's previously planned bioethics workshop or conference, which was happening in early November. So it worked out pretty well. There were already some bioethicists who were going to attend, and this way I could invite a few more people from different backgrounds and different disciplines to come to this 1-day workshop. And I'm happy to say we had a productive meeting. The agenda really was just to see what kinds of questions we all could agree were important to look into at the intersection of bioethics and traditional medicines in this region. So we had a good group of about 15 people attended. We had representation from a variety of countries. We had Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Laos. And we had a variety of disciplinary perspectives as well: anthropology, medicine, bioethics, a TCM practitioner and historian, and even people who work in public health. I didn't write that on the slide, but they were also there. And what we discussed in this workshop, we arrived at a few distinct areas that we think need to be addressed if we're going to develop any sort of bioethical research in traditional medicines, specifically for Southeast Asia. And the first is what I would call the demarcation question. What counts as a traditional medicine? What makes it traditional as opposed to something else? What sets traditional medicines apart from other things that get called complementary or alternative? Is there a meaningful difference between a traditional medicine and a folk remedy or a home remedy? I was very interested to discover that when we had this meeting, hearing the stories of people's engagement with traditional medicines from Indonesia could look quite different than what I'm familiar with in Singapore with the population's consumption of TCM. So just as an example, TCM is quite, I would say, institutionalized. There are educational structures set up. There's a lot of literature out there about it. There are degree granting programs. So it's quite a well-established and robust tradition. In Indonesia, it seems like there were many different kinds of practices, and they seemed more, at least the way that people were discussing it, seemed more practice-based rather than systematized in this way. So I learned about the consumption of jamu and how common that is, and also how that's an herbal remedy, a variety of kinds of herbal remedies that people make and drink on a regular basis. Okay, I'll move on a little bit. The other questions that came up and were at times kind of hotly debated in this workshop were the question of efficacy and what standards of efficacy should be applied when we discuss something like traditional medicines. So this is something that emerges in the Anglophone Western-centric discourse as well. A lot of people who are skeptical about traditional or alternative medicines are used to applying the standards of Western biomedical science. And the question is whether that is warranted or fair, given that the theories that underpin different traditional remedies are very different. So in some sense, traditional medicines are aiming at slightly different goals and see themselves as doing something pretty different than what Western medicine is claiming that it can do. And so judging them by the same standard may or may not be fair. So the last thing that we discussed is this thorny problem of degrees of integration. So there's various ways that this can be configured in different national contexts. I think there's a lot of work that could be done to describe and understand how traditional remedies are integrated or not integrated in the different countries in the region. I'll move on to my next slide. Okay, so in my last remaining time, I'll just briefly summarize what we hope to do in the future. So like I said, this is primarily a network building project. So we initially had the people who were attending at the Yogyakarta workshop, but my intention is to set up a second workshop sometime in early 2026, where we hope to invite more people. We will hope to send out a call for papers and present the findings from this research project alongside other people, that whoever we can find who can attend this event. And it's also our hope that we can put together a special issue on this theme for Asian Bioethics Review. Okay, I'll wrap up there. Last slide. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I don't have any questions in the chat yet, but I'm just wondering if anybody in the audience has a question now for Catherine, please put it into the chat. Otherwise, there will, if you're still thinking about it, because I'm sure that's sparked a lot of ideas. Otherwise, we can come back to it at the end. So, any questions? Okay, we'll move on to the next speaker and come back to questions at the end. Thank you, Catherine. So I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Associate Professor Agnes Pratiwi, who is an Associate Professor at the Department of Medical Education and Bioethics at the Center of Bioethics and Medical Humanities, Faculty of Medicine, University of Gadjah Mada in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. And her prior experience as a dentist in remote Borneo sparked her interest in public health and the ethical aspects of primary healthcare and health systems, leading her to prioritize research in this area. And her PhD, which was at the University of Amsterdam, focused on patient values, ethical aspects of access to healthcare in Indonesia. So, Agnes, very pleased to have you here, and I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for the introduction. I will share my slide. Yeah, I hope it's up now. Thank you for the opportunity to join this research fellowship grants, and to present here a bit about our research that is about patient autonomy in decision-making in Southeast Asia culture, and in particular with primary data collection from the country where I come from Indonesia. Before telling more about our research, I would like to acknowledge the team, Prof. Dick Willems from University of Amsterdam, Ibu Siwi from CBMH, and also Puspa, Ririn, Dini, and also Fahmi. Some of them also attend this webinar. Thank you for your contribution. So also, what inspired us to do this research is also a bit related with what Catherine has found, that mostly the literature and the sources that we use in our education when we do research in bioethics is from Western countries. And during my research, when I did my PhD study, also when we have bioethics discussion in Yogyakarta, in Indonesia, we discovered that the context could be quite different or sometimes very different than the theories or the literature that we source with. And there is very little information also from Southeast Asia. So here, although autonomy is essential, we do tend to stem our knowledge from the Western, American, or European context. However, autonomy is understood and valued very differently across cultures, and there are lack of accounts from other contexts, such as from Indonesia. And we find that relying solely on the concept that emerge from the Western values might be insufficient or might not resemble fully the practice or in the field in Southeast Asia or in Indonesia. So we wanted to know the existing concept of autonomy in Southeast Asian culture and also in Indonesia, and what might be this concept have for the implication of the patient's decision making. What we will do is a systematic literature review, which we already start also. And then we will do a qualitative data collection from the Indonesian context, a qualitative review, a qualitative study with in-depth interviews to patients and families. And then we will do the analysis. So we will see and we will compare or relate the concepts that we get from the literature review with the data that we get when we will go to the field to collect the data. So this is what we have started, the literature review process. So we kind of a bit focused our search on autonomy related to decision-making in surgery. And first it was Southeast Asia that we are looking for. But when we did the search and we just skim, screen roughly through the literature, we did not really or very few find from Southeast Asia. So we currently broaden our search to the Asia context. So this is currently our search strategy, but we do still ongoing doing the screening and then the literature review. I would like to showcase some of the articles that we found that is related to difficulties in surgical decision-making in Taiwan. So the main findings here is that 80% the decision was made with family or physician, and only 15% expected to decide personally. And male participants, they had more communication difficulties than female. And it was quite surprising to us that age, education, and marital status were not significant variables here. And this is also again a study from Taiwan. There are reasons for family involvement, which is shared responsibility and also to ensure the correctness of medical information and safeguard well-being. So there are good reasons for the involvement of family in the patient's decision-making related to surgery. And family members help also to reduce patients' emotional stress during the surgery. And they help also to communicate, the patient to communicate with medical personnel. And these are only two studies that I showcase about some of the literature that we already find. And related to the qualitative study that we will do, these are the main questions that we will ask. So about how was the decision-making process that the patient experienced, and also what was the role of other people in their decision-making process, and also what do they think should be the ideal process. So we are still waiting for our ethical clearance, but we did do a pilot study, a piloting of our in-depth interview guide to see if there are some inputs or some insights that we get from trying out our in-depth interview. So from this piloting, we discussed with the group that we encountered that there are some demographic features that may affect how people exercise their autonomy, and that inspired us to record the different demographic characteristic, also to see how it may affect the results and during our field study. But we did not find any significant changes or difference that we should make as compared to our first in-depth interview guide. So the main questions were the same, and we will keep more attention of the different characteristics of the respondents. And then there were some, from our piloting, there were some initial findings that we found interesting. So only from these 3 interviews, at the end, the patient was more the one who make a decision. However, there are some dynamics, and we found that like gender and some other characteristics were also related. So when the patient decides for him or herself, it is because they think that they know what is best to them, and they know the appropriate timing for surgery, because we take the focus on surgery. And then in these 3, there are always involvement of family in the decision making. So they are sharing the roles between the wife and the children. And it's interesting that sharing the role is not only during the surgery, but also how they will manage the family, because the family needs still to have the daily activities. Meanwhile, one of the family members has to be hospitalized and also going through the surgery. And we found also that the husbands may affect the wife's decision, and we find that in this in the interview that they support the wife's decision. So we still plan to continue our research. We will continue the systematic review and also the primary data collection. And we plan to have some outputs like peer reviews, publication, and also presentation in a regional or international conference. We will also disseminate the results through our Center for Bioethics Network, and also a news platform, and possibly some policy briefs. Yeah, this is some of the initial findings and the research process that I could share from our team. And thank you for attending and for listening.
Thank you very much, Agnes, for that. And there's a couple of questions in the chat. So if I ask you one now, and then I think we'll leave the others until the end. Thank you. So there's a question here. You ask about the role of other people, and was there a particular reason for you asking this? Is this something that's common in Indonesia? And what would relational values that you think, what would be relational values that might be different in Indonesia in particular?
Thank you, Sharon, for your questions. Yeah, very interesting. So, during our discussion with the group, so how should we how should we see this autonomy in our context? And we think that, okay, we will not yet say if this is which kind of autonomy. Is it like individual or is it relational? Or not yet say what values could be there, although we always have some values in mind, like from anecdotal data or from what we see in how decisions are made, especially in the hospital. It's almost always with the family or with family here can mean like the close family, like the partner and also the children, but also in some ethnics, like we mentioned the Batak, it might be that the close family is not only the family at home, but also these who have relation related to or an important position related to their ethnicity. So I think it will be already different, but there is a common value is that people may value also the input of their family, although the definition of family could be really different if it is the intimate family or also the extended family or someone important traditionally, something like that.
Thank you very much, Agnes, and we'll look forward to having more discussion at the end. Thank you. So I'm pleased now to pass on to our last two presenters, and they're going to jointly present on a SEED Awards. So Anne Liu is was a research assistant at Oak Crew, Ho Chi Minh City. She's now in the first year of her PhD. She's been there since 2020, involved in qualitative research on vital sign monitoring in critical care settings. And through this work, she developed an interest in ethical and moral decision-making around end-of-life issues in the Vietnamese context. And she will be co-presenting with Alex Day, who is also a research assistant at the Oxford University Clinical Research Unit in Ho Chi Minh City. Alex has a BSc in biology and chemistry and is currently a pre-med student. And her interests are global health and medical ethics. So Anne and Alex, I will hand over. If you can share your screen, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
It's on the, thank you. Okay, so hello, I'm Alex. Lovely to see you all here today. I will talk a little bit about the background of our study before passing on to Eng, who will talk more about the actual study itself. Our study is titled Exploring Ethical and Sociocultural Aspects of Hospital Discharge Home to Die in Vietnam. This is our study team. We're very fortunate because we're able to work with a lot of the health professionals from the Hospital for Tropical Diseases in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. And in terms of background, so of course, end-of-life care is really a crucial public health issue. It's associated with a high burden, a large impact, and also a really high potential for reducing suffering, whether that's literal physical pain or emotional well-being and mental well-being of patients and family members of patients. This is really salient in Southeast Asia, but particularly in Vietnam, because Vietnam actually has the highest elderly population in Southeast Asia. In 2017, this was around 12%, and in 2038, it's predicted to increase to about 20%. So we're expecting to see an increase in demand on healthcare services. Another really salient factor in Vietnam is this: we're experiencing the transition from communicable disease to predominantly non-communicable disease. And here is some data about that. So you can see in 1996, the mortality rate from communicable disease was about 33%, so 1 in 3. And in 2026, this is predicted to go down to about 6%, so just over 1 in 20. And this really big shift to non-communicable disease is associated with longer end-of-life periods and protracted illness at the end of life. And because of this, it's a new landscape where healthcare workers and families and patients are having to make really complex decisions. So some really specific examples in Vietnam. So in hospital, actually quite a lot of the patients are discharged home to pass away at home. You can see in Việt Đức Hospital, this rate is 92%. And in Bạch Mai Hospital, it's 49%. And nearly 70% of all recorded deaths do actually happen at home. Another crucial thing is that Vietnam's critical care in hospital mortality rate is one of the lowest in the world, much lower than other regions in the world. Vietnam's is about 5.9%. And this is possibly related to shorter stays, which enable people to then be discharged home before they pass away. One study from over 6,000 stroke patients showed that the median in hospital discharge was 4 days, and that in-hospital mortality was only 3%. And also in terms of ambulances, as well as, of course, taking people to hospital, transferring people between hospitals, they have been reported to also take people home from the hospital to pass away at home.
Thank you, Alice, for the background information. So next, I'm going to present the finding from my recent ethnographic work in the ICU in Vietnam that is relevant to this project. As you can see on the screen, the diagram on the right showing the forces to keep the patient in the ICU and the forces to take the patient home. The green arrows prioritize the patient's well-being, while the red arrows do not. I will go into detail of the factor in the next slides, but in the reality, it's more complex than this because it depends on the prognosis of the patient, the doctors, nurses, and the family. We only do the observation in the ICU and interview the doctor, so we haven't explored what happened when the patients go home, but keeping the patient in the ICU have is the double-edged sword. The benefit is like maximize the opportunity for the patient, avoid the prognostic pessimism, and allow the patient and family time to accept the bad news if it happened. But there's a burden for the non-beneficial treatment. There's a suffering of physical and mental for the families and the patients. The staff also feel like moral injury from delivering non-beneficial care, and this also create high cost for the limited resource in the country like Vietnam. For the structural factors, there's no alternative care between the ICU and home. There's no home care-based option that covered by insurance. There's no guidelines or legal framework to protect the medical doctors. The doctors with only medical training have to help consider other cultural factor and help to navigate the patient through the moral decision. They also prevent the family from catastrophic spending, uh, and family member also feel like pressure to make the difficult decision when they have limited medical knowledge, and there's no formal support for the family during this difficult time. For the cultural factor, there's still a taboo talking about death in Vietnam, and we believe that a good death happened at home with the loved one, but sometimes the family rush to make the decision to take the patient home early. And the practice of the doctor in Vietnam is quite similar to other um, physic physician in Asia. Like they more likely to escalating care, like including CPR, intubation using vasopressor when they feel more uncomfortable talking to the family about withhold or withdraw care. Uh, Consider like good quality of dying for the patient. So this study we developed from my previous study and also um, this published study on minimal invasive autopsy that the theme of emerge death and dying also emerging theme. Um, and this study, our research question look at social cultural aspect of the process, decision making process, also the ethical challenges for family and healthcare worker to navigate the process, how ethical and social aspect difference between urban and rural setting. The objective is examine ethical and social aspect around hospital discharge for home to die, gaining inter, inter understanding of and experience of the key stakeholder, inform and co-develop the guidelines to support the decision making and communication by the healthcare workers, and inform uh, co-develop resource to support the family. At this time, we will conduct the study at two different sites in Ho Chi Minh City, which is the urban area, and one at the An Giang Province Central General Hospital, which is more urban, suburban site. And the study will include observation and in-depth interview with the healthcare worker, the family member, the CBOs, and ambulance drivers. There is a timeline of the project. We already developed the study tool. We have approval from the local hospital. We conduct some pilot interview to edit our interview tool, and we hope to do on the data collection in the next 6 months and doing the writing and report at the end of 2000 and 2025. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any question, please post in the chat. Thank you, Southeast Asia Bioethics Network, to fund this study project.
Thank you very much, Alex and Anne, for that very clear presentation, and good luck with the research. There is a question here from Serene. Can you describe what is meant culturally by a good death? And do you think this is something that's specific in Vietnam compared to other countries?
Yeah. So for the Vietnamese, and even like I do more reading about other countries, so they all consider the good death is the patient take the last breath at home, surrounding with like family member, because actually try, like even rent the ambulance with the staff member for the very critical patient to do the manual ventilator to take the patient home. So they do a lot of effort to make sure the patient pass away at home. Um, so that's the cultural aspect of a good death in Vietnam.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, so there was another question here from Pek San. What difficulties do you face in getting families to share their emotions with you during this difficult time? And then I'm going to open it up to a wider questions. Thank you.
Yes, so I'm lucky to have some experience to anticipate in the previous study that I share about like minimal invasive autopsy. So we interviewed the family member who had the experience with pass away loved one. I know it's difficult, but we quite experienced. So if we experience like they have emotional outbreak during the interview, we can stop. But we also consider to do the interview after 100 day, which is the um, mourning or the grieving period to um, prevent the uneasy emotion that happen during the interview. Yep, I waited like 6 months, 3 months.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you very much to our three speakers, and I'll open it up to questions for all three speakers now. There's a question here for Catherine. Catherine, you mentioned that building a network is one of your main objectives. Why did you feel that this was important, and what do you hope to achieve through a network, please?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So to me, it's quite clear that the network is important, given that, like I said, so much of the literature that exists currently is focused in the West. So without building a network of people who live and work in this region, I think it's pretty much impossible to get a view of what's really happening on the ground with these issues. And I think that that was proved by what we discussed in the Yogyakarta meeting that we already had. There were so many things that I learned from what people were sharing about their experience or observations of traditional medicine as it's engaged with in Indonesia, for example, that don't fit the pattern of what I've observed or read about in Singapore, in the US, or in the UK. So I think that's one reason why it's very important here.
Thank you, Catherine. And Agnes, there's another question here, which is in your pilot interviews, which I know was only 3, but did religious issues come up in any of the respondents' answers?
Thank you, Pai, for the question. Yeah, I think it's a good question for us to reflect on this, because currently, yeah, because it's only piloting currently. We did not encounter any religious issues, but we did not plan yet also to record the data of what religion the respondent have. So I think this is a good question for us to reflect, that maybe we will need to see about this aspect. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's interesting whether they bring it up as a driver of their response or not. Yeah, thank you. So there's a question here for all the speakers. Are you planning on engaging with Indigenous communities in your research and exploring potential tensions between certain local and Indigenous values or perspectives? So perhaps I'll ask Catherine first, because I wonder if you thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, my answer would be that basically, yes, I'm interested in that, but this is a network building project. So part of the first step is finding them, finding scholars who are either already doing that work or scholars who come from that community who I can connect with other people who are interested in these topics. So it is something that I would like to include. And again, I think that the Yogyakarta event that we had was a good opportunity as a first step in that direction. I did get a chance to hear one talk from a practitioner of Balinese traditional medicine, which was very interesting. So, I mean, I would be excited to find these connections. That's what I can say so far.
Thank you. So open that up to any of the other speakers, Alex or Anne or Agnes, the A team.
Yes. So in our research, we don't particularly look at indigenous communities, but we invite for inclusion of them, and because we plan to do one area in Yogyakarta and then one in Borneo, which is there is also like indigenous Dayak people there. So it might be possible that we could also have them, but it is more of the characteristic that we will the diverse characteristic of the respondents that we will have, but not in particular looking for the indigenous values. Thank you.
Anne or Alex?
Yeah, so I'll answer this one. We'd say that we're mainly focusing on the city versus rural populations. But of course, if we do have access to ethnic communities or indigenous people, of course, it would be really interesting to hear their perspectives as well. So yeah, we do hope to hear their perspectives if we can. Yeah. Primarily a comparison between city and rural.
Thank you. So we're a little bit over the hour, but thank you very much, everyone, for staying on. I don't see people dropping off, which means that you must be all very interested. And congratulations to the interesting speakers as well. So thank you very much to our 3 awardees, and we wish you all the best with your projects, and look forward to maybe in a year's time hearing the results of these and the other awardees as well. So